Hello and welcome back to the Edge of the Box podcast, a podcast by WhoScored.com, here to preview all the weekend's Premier League action. I'm your host, Dan Bardell, joined by my hero, Jonathan Wilson. This is my favourite hour of the week, but there is a downer to the hour because, Josh, it's your last one, mate.
Yeah, last show. To be honest, I think people only really listen to the relationship between you and Jonathan. So I don't
think people listen to me, to be honest. I think they just listen to Jonathan.
Yeah, that's true. So I don't think I'll be missed by the listeners. But yeah, the show will continue and it'll be even better.
You're right, Jonathan.
I just realised I'd forgotten the microphone. But it's here now.
It's pretty pivotal to the podcast that you have a microphone, Jonathan. It's sad to see Josh go.
I just can't believe he's on the beach already. I mean, literally in Marbella as we speak.
I know. Josh, do you want to explain that situation to our listeners?
So I'm working abroad for this final week, but in Marbella at the moment, but still all focused on football.
Well, you didn't really explain it, but fine. You're in Marbella, having a lovely time. Got in about 20 minutes ago from his night out. Josh, I mean, as you did only get set up for the podcast 20 minutes ago, do you have the Champions League team of the week?
I do, yeah. I watched, I don't know what games you watched, but I watched the Liverpool game yesterday evening. I was surprised that ended 7-1. Didn't think that performance sort of befitted a 7-1 scoreline. But yeah, I'll go through the team of the week. We've got a former Liverpool goalkeeper in goal, Simon Mignolet. He made 9 saves in Club Brugge's 0-0 draw with Atletico Madrid. That's a very typical Champions League scoreline for them, it feels. At right back, we've got Daniel Sundergren from Maccabi Haifa. Maccabi Haifa obviously beat Juventus, who no idea why they've still got Allegri in charge. The centre-back pairing, we've got Tanguy Nianzou for Sevilla. He scored in their 1-0 draw with Dortmund. Then we've got bloody Antonio Rudiger as the next centre-back. He scored a stoppage time equaliser for Real Madrid against Shakhtar. And then we've got David Raum at left-back. He was the WhoScored man of the match as Leipzig beat Celtic 2-0. Into midfield, we've got Mo Salah, who scored a 6-minute hat-trick in that Liverpool game that I've just mentioned. And then in midfield, we've got the well-known partnership of Omar Atzili of Maccabi Haifa. He scored both goals in their win over Juventus, and he's joined by Nicholas Seewald. He scored the equaliser versus Dynamo Zagreb for Salzburg. Then Son Heung-min, he's the left midfielder. He scored twice in Tottenham's 3-2 win over Frankfurt. And then up front, we've got Robert Lewandowski, who saved Barcelona against Inter in that 3-3 draw, scored twice, although a result that's probably not going to be enough for them to qualify for the next round, which I imagine will be quite catastrophic for them. And up front, joining him is Roberto Firmino, who scored twice and got 1 assist in that 7-1 win. But yeah, that's our Champions League team of the week.
Firmino, quite prolific so far this season. I watched the Barcelona game. Great game, my favourite game that I've watched so far this season. Not often I choose the right Champions League game to watch, but I definitely got it right last night. Jonathan, which one did you watch?
Yeah, same as you. I watched the Barca-Inter game, which was a brilliant game. But you realise just how poor Barcelona are defensively. That second half, just every time Inter went forward, you felt they'd score. I mean, they really should have won it. That chance they had very late on.
Well, why didn't he pass?
Yeah, if he'd squared it, it's. But because he was too close to the keeper, he was never gonna score. Yeah, and the previous night I'd watched PSG just to see if there's any Mbappe fallout. But I'm glad to see Simon Mignolet play. Yeah, he was because I obviously saw him a lot at Sunderland. I thought he was really good at Sunderland, but also sort of thought, yeah, maybe Liverpool's a step too far. And I think that happens quite a lot with players, that they just go one club too many, or one level too many, and then they get a bad reputation. Their confidence dips. But he's a very good keeper. He might not be a great keeper. He's a very good keeper, and it's good that he hasn't just sort of withered away. That he's found a new successful phase of his career. And in that game, from what I saw, didn't look particularly good to watch, but I think Club Brugge for 2 or 3 seasons have actually been pretty good in the Champions League and quite not just effective, but actually an interesting team. The way they set up and the clinical nature of the way they're capable of breaking.
Yeah, wise words from Jonathan. One move too far. Josh could be saying that about you in a year's time. Let's do what we're here to do then and look at the Premier League action. And we're going to start with Liverpool against Manchester City. And Josh, I guess at the start of the season, not many people saw the alarming gap that there is between the two teams coming.
No, not at all. I think all of the focus was really, everyone thought it would be between Liverpool and Man City again for the title. And it was really whoever sort of clicked best with their new sort of strikers. But Liverpool have got problems all over the pitch, as it turns out, and now they're in for a fight just to get into the top four, I think, this season. I think they're 6 points off fourth already, 14th off Arsenal, who currently lead the table. And things just seem to go from bad to worse for Liverpool. I mean, they did beat Rangers 7-1 in midweek, but I think that was more to do with the fact that Alan McGregor didn't have a great game and Rangers weren't very good, to be honest, because it wasn't really a 7-1 performance. And Liverpool still did look a little bit shaky at the back. They still did look a little bit vulnerable. Klopp went for that 4-4-2 formation again. But I'll be interested to see if he still does go for that, because Luis Diaz is obviously a big part of that. And that does suit him, that formation, because obviously he played it at Porto, and now that he's injured for the rest of the year, Trent Alexander-Arnold's out for a few weeks, but although that probably does Klopp a favour that he's out by injury rather than out by him having to drop him. Joel Matip's also out for a couple of weeks, although it was good to see Ibrahim Konate come back into the team because he was outstanding at the end of last season. But I looked into the WhoScored ratings for 2022 for Liverpool, and Alexander-Arnold is their top-rated player, Luis Diaz is second, Mane is third, and Joel Matip is fourth. Obviously, Mane now at Bayern Munich, but that's their top four players who are unavailable at the moment, heading into a game against Manchester City, who are obviously flying with Haaland. But yeah, it'd be interesting to see if he does stick with that 4-4-2, because I don't know if Harvey Elliott and Fabio Carvalho will be picked every game, and particularly in those massive games. But I think what that Rangers game showed was, if he does go with that formation, Salah simply has to be in that front two. It's been weird to watch him playing so wide, more of a creator than a goal scorer. And he showed that if you do put him in the penalty area, he will score. He only took 6 minutes to score a hat-trick against Rangers. So if he does go for that formation, then Salah simply has to be up front, I think. But then I'm not sure if he would do that because of the players that would then go on the wings.
Yeah, Luis Diaz is a huge loss, Jonathan. He feels like the lightning rod for Liverpool. But I think a couple of games this season when they've needed a goal or needed something to happen, it's been Luis Diaz that comes up with that bit of magic from nowhere. They've obviously sold Mane to Bayern Munich, who could play that left-hand side role. Now Diaz out for the foreseeable as well. They suddenly look a little bit weak on that side. I guess Jota will play there if they stick to a 4-3-3, but I don't think that's his best position. So they're a bit short on that side now.
Yeah, I mean, Darwin Nunez has played there for Uruguay. I'm not sure he's played there particularly well for Uruguay, but he has played in a sort of wide left role. So that is possibly an option as a sort of, I don't know, sort of in the sort of Emil Heskey role of being a big bloke attacking from wide. But Jota or Carvalho can do it. I just sort of feel that the general evolution of that forward line has been complicated, and Luis Diaz is part of that. That he came in last season in January, adapted really well. You know, everybody was talking about, it's amazing how quickly he sort of got used to Liverpool way of playing, and all of that's true. And as you say, he has scored a couple of brilliant goals this season. But him being there moved Mane into the middle, and that meant the dynamic of that front line, which whether it was Firmino, whether it was Jota in the middle, you had the centre forward dropping deep, which created space for Salah. That was broken up. So Salah last season, up until January the 2nd, which is his last game before going to the Cup of Nations, was averaging 3.9 shots per game. This season, he's only averaging 2.9 shots per game. He's just not getting into the box in the same way. Now maybe if you play the 2-3 in the middle and you have Salah in the middle, that's a way around that. But you almost think, is not having Luis Diaz, is that an opportunity to go back to the old style of 4-3-3 with Firmino, who's having a very good season, dropping off? But that then means probably no place for Darwin Nunez or Nunez coming off the bench, unless he can be repurposed into that sort of big left-sided striker, which, as I say, he has done for Uruguay, albeit not entirely convincingly.
Yeah, because the 4-4-2, Jonathan, obviously it's what they're playing at the moment, but it won't have been something they prepped to do in pre-season. They kind of had to do it because things weren't going well. That doesn't feel like a sustainable formation for Liverpool to me.
Certainly not against the best teams. I mean, you've seen them have two very convincing wins in the Champions League playing that, but against Arsenal, I mean, within a minute they'd been overrun in midfield, and you're sort of thinking, well, if they try and play with just two in midfield against City, if you've got Rodri and De Bruyne and Bernardo Silva, Liverpool just won't get the ball. And if you've got four players up the pitch, they're going to get hammered. So if they do go in that double pivot against City, those wide forwards are going to have to do an awful lot of work. Now, Klopp said last week that he took Salah off after, I think it was 69 minutes he went off. And he said, I took him off because of the defensive shift he put in. Well, that was a defensive shift that included no tackles and no interceptions. So, it is true that you can defend very well without making tackles and interceptions by just being in the right place. I have to say, I didn't really notice Salah doing that. And the impact Martinelli had on the game on that side suggests he wasn't particularly effective in doing that. So if they go into this City game with just the two in midfield, I think that's an enormous risk. Maybe they can just press them really hard and really high and rattle them. But I think that there's a massive downside risk to that.
Yeah, and when I've watched Liverpool this season, they look like they've lacked the energy and intensity of previous seasons. Some of them look like they're running through treacle at times defensively. I think of Fabinho, Henderson. It's not the Liverpool of old. I suggest they'd probably have to play. I mean, a 4-4-2 would be very risky, but I would think they'd have to play a double pivot against City anyway, in some way.
But they then need another midfielder though. So yeah. I think you'd ideally you'd have Fabinho, but he's, for whatever reason, just isn't playing well this season. Henderson playing pretty deep alongside him, and Thiago sort of filling in the spaces.
Yeah.
That's what they'd want. I'm just not sure on form you can do that. And I that's why they have. I don't know what the solution is. There is no obvious solution. That's why it's a massive problem.
Yeah, and Klopp getting a little bit antsy in his pre-match press conference for the Rangers game as well. Josh, Darwin Nunez against Erling Haaland, then two of the bigger summer signings that we saw go through in this window. A lot's changed since the Community Shield, and everyone was going, "Oh, not sure about Haaland," but Darwin Nunez looks good. A lot's changed since then.
Yeah, it has changed quite quickly. I think a lot of people in pre-season, there was a lot of sort of people quick to jump on Darwin Nunez for some of his sort of quite awful misses, and then he scored 4 goals against Leipzig, I think it was, and then he obviously scored played well in the Community Shield, and Haaland sort of had a bit of a day to forget. But I think if you looked at the finer details of that game, you saw that the movement that Haaland brought and the positions that he got into, but he just missed a couple of sort of chances that we now expect Haaland to sort of bury. But since then, Haaland's pretty much done everything perfectly, and Nunez, it has been a bit of a struggle for him. He did score against Rangers last night, but up until that point, I thought he was actually quite awful. He looks like he's working really hard, but sometimes it looks like he's working too hard. When he does get chances, he sort of either rushes, or he just doesn't have the same sort of composure, or he's not showing the same sort of composure and killer instinct that sort of Haaland is showing. But yeah, it'll be interesting to see if he sort of does play in this game, because Firmino, you have to say, I don't think many people would have predicted his sort of goal scoring form this season. But you'd have to say that Firmino definitely has to play. And if they're playing in that 4-3-3, maybe he does put Nunez out wide, but it doesn't seem like that would play to his strengths, because you just want him sort of his movement sort of in more central areas, I would imagine. But yeah, it's been a bit of a strange start, a struggled start. I think he sort of has felt the pressure at times. Obviously, that red card didn't help. Klopp sort of alluded to the fact that he just needs to sort of relax a little bit, I guess, which is exactly what sort of Haaland's been doing for Manchester City all season. 15 goals already for Haaland, which would put him pretty high on the Golden Boot list last season as well. I think only 4 players finished with more than 15 goals across the whole of last season. Obviously, what day is it today? 13th of October, and he's already got that many goals, which is just ridiculous. Like, I don't really know what else you can say about Haaland at this point. It's ridiculous what he's sort of doing.
Yeah, because Haaland's so good. The other players at Manchester City aren't getting spoken about as much, Jonathan. Phil Foden, one of those players. Why isn't he an undisputed player for England? He's got 1 goal in his first 18 caps for our country, and he's just such a sensational footballer. Very little weakness to his game, but for England, we've not really seen the best of him. I wouldn't say, and you're not guaranteed that he's going to start the World Cup, but for Manchester City so far this season, and in particular recent weeks, he's been in tremendous form.
Yeah, I mean, he's a brilliant footballer, and I think he's a sort of footballer that England haven't really traditionally produced. That sort of tactical intelligence, that awareness, and you saw it when England won the Youth World Cup, how instrumental he was to that. As to why he hasn't really done it for England, I don't think any footballer really has a value. I mean, maybe Haaland will be a counter to this, but very few footballers have a value in and of themselves, a value within the system in which they're playing. And for whatever reason, that England system doesn't seem to get the best out of him. And I can see why it would be difficult for players going from City, which is a very, very structured, very precise, the way you play is laid out in advance. Moving from that to England, I think, can be difficult. I think it's a very necessarily. It's not to criticise Southgate. It's just international football. You can't map it out quite as precisely, and there's really only one spot Foden can play, because Kane will always play. And if you play Kane, one of Kane's great strengths is his ability to come deep and play those balls on the turn. You don't want to take that out of his game, because that's key to his movement. That means you need a runner who goes beyond him. Well, that probably has to be Sterling. There's not really another player who does that. And then you have this sort of great squabble for places of Foden and Mount and Grealish, and actually Saka maybe could replace Sterling. That is a possibility. And so, Foden has one bad game. Well, Mount comes in, and you can't. That's not nobody's fault, because Mount, the last 2 or 3 weeks has been brilliant, and is also a brilliant player. You sort of dream of a world in which Mount and Foden can play together, and I think at club level that you could do that. You could put in place a system. You could get the centre forward who would work well with them. But Kane, I don't think, is that centre forward, or isn't, given the lack of time available. And so if Foden and Mount are constantly competing for that spot, then neither of them really are ever going to, unless they're in brilliant form, neither of them can ever be quite secure in it. And we saw the game against Germany, that it was after Mount came on for Foden that England suddenly lit up. And again, that's not necessarily a criticism of Foden particularly, but when you have somebody as good as Mount in your position, then it is very, very difficult.
For City, Jonathan, in your opinion, what's Foden's best position?
I think probably playing wide on the left.
Okay.
But
that's unusual, isn't it, for a left footer to play on the left nowadays? That's an unusual.
Yeah, it is. But one of the ways that City now play, and this is one of the things that Guardiola sort of flips around all the time. But if you think what's just, maybe this isn't quite the case now with Haaland, but if you said last season, describe the classic City goal, and it's lots of passes in midfield, then somebody slipping the ball inside the fullback for the wide forward, coming around, getting to the byline, cutting it back for somebody to slam it in from 6 yards out. Well, there you do need the wingers playing on the right side, on their orthodox side. So the left foot's on the left, right foot's on the right, which is a change from the way, say, Guardiola played at Bayern with Robben and Ribéry coming in onto their stronger feet, or Messi coming off the right onto his stronger left foot at Barcelona. So, Foden has played on the right, and he's perfectly good playing on the right. He can do either. But given the other players in the squad, part of me thinks that he maybe should be the most attacking of the three central midfielders, so then he's more involved in the play. But given the other players around, I think probably that wide left role.
Yeah.
But then that gets in the way of Grealish, I guess. So.
Pep said he can play anyway. I think he even mooted that he might be able to play left back in an interview that he did recently. Pep's Phil Foden could be lining up left back one day.
I've looked at my the combined team you've asked us to do, and I don't have him in that left wing position. So,
is he in it though?
Oh, he is in it. Yeah,
I was going to say he must be in it. Josh, Manchester United fan, big fan of Phil Foden.
I wasn't a fan of him when he scored a hat-trick against Manchester United, but generally speaking, yeah, big fan of Phil Foden. I think, as Jonathan said, he's not really a typical footballer England's produce a lot of, and when he is playing at his best, which he certainly is at the moment, he's right up towards the top in our Premier League form rankings, which I'll say in a moment. But yeah, he's just so technical and so good. And I think the ball that he played through for Haaland against Arsenal where Haaland hit? No, against Southampton when Haaland hit the post.
Yeah.
That ball through was something that you'd probably think more of Kevin De Bruyne, but yeah, he's brilliant. And I think Pep Guardiola did say, I think in that same interview that you just mentioned, Dan, that he probably does see his future playing in the central midfield, which would be great to see, because that's a position where I think England again haven't produced a lot of footballers like him. But in terms of the Premier League form rankings, Haaland's still top, as he probably will be all season. Foden's moved up to second. Then we've got João Cancelo in third, Kevin De Bruyne in fourth. So the top four are all Manchester City players, which doesn't bode too well for Liverpool this weekend. And then we've got Saka and Jesus from Arsenal, Rodri, so another Manchester City player, and then Kane, Maddison and Martinelli. So yes, I think Foden was fourth the week before, and now he's up to second. He's got 9 goals and assists in as many league games this season, playing probably some of his best football. And it would be really disappointing if he doesn't start for England in the World Cup. He's just so good, and it is weird that his form hasn't been too good for England. But I think, as Jonathan said, there is sort of factors why that is the case. But yeah, brilliant footballer.
Yeah, I mean, everyone thought Foden was going to replace David Silva when David Silva left Manchester City, but he kind of actually replaced Leroy Sané because they both left at the same time. Foden's played more of his football wide. Jonathan's teased the combined 11. I'm going to mix things up a little bit this week. I'm going to come to you first, Jonathan, for your combined 11. And I'm sure you're going to turn around and tell me you've picked a Manchester City team. But what is your combined 11?
I put Alisson in goal.
Okay.
Just because I don't think Ederson has been quite at his best this season, but the other 10 are all City.
All City. What 10 have you gone for?
Well, I mean, the right back's a bit of an issue because obviously Walker's injured. So I've got Akanji at right back. Which I guess it might be an argument against playing Nunez wide left, given that you think Nunez might be able to bully a traditional fullback in the air, while Akanji's not going to be bullied in the air, being a centre back who's moved out there. So Akanji, Diaz, and then I don't understand what's going on with Laporte because as far as I understand, he's fit, but he seems not to be. Yeah, Ake seems to be preferred to him. So
Ake's done well, to be fair to him. I think he's just kept his place on form in the main. He's played a lot of the big games.
Yeah. So I've got Ake there, but with a sort of Laporte in brackets question mark afterwards. Then Cancelo left back, Rodri, De Bruyne, Bernardo Silva, Foden, Haaland, and Grealish.
Okay, that's one thing about Manchester City at the moment. I mean, another sensational player, Cancelo. It's telling that even when Kyle Walker's injured, they haven't moved him across in the league games because he's just so good at that left back role. Now they'd rather play a centre back at right back so that they don't have to switch Cancelo. I think that's really intriguing. Josh, what's the Who Scored 11 then?
It's actually entirely Manchester City, which is quite incredible when you consider.
I thought Alisson might have been higher than Ederson in terms of rating.
It is really close, but I think it's just because Liverpool do just seem to concede every single game that it's gone against them. Whereas Man City have only conceded 1 shot on target across their last 3 games, which is pretty impressive defending. Obviously, Ederson doesn't have anything to do there. So he's not doing anything wrong, not doing particularly anything right, but just because he's getting those clean sheets, it's helping him a little bit of late anyway. And then the back 4, you mentioned that Cancelo doesn't get moved over. We've moved him over just because of the issue at right back. Walker's obviously injured. Trent Alexander-Arnold's obviously injured. So our back 4 is Cancelo, Akanji, Diaz, and Ake. We've got Ake at left back. Obviously, he has played there 1 or 2 times in the past for Manchester City.
Got the same back 4 as Jonathan, but just in a different way.
A different order, yeah.
Just a different order, yeah. So the same back 4 as Jonathan. And then we've got Bernardo Silva, Rodri, De Bruyne, Grealish, Haaland, Foden. So yeah, entirely Manchester City, which is ridiculous really when you think Liverpool only a few months ago where there was talk about them doing the quadruple, and obviously they've dropped off so much they don't even get a player in this team.
Yeah, we'll have done Liverpool-Manchester City 11s on this show last season and the season before, I'm sure, and it definitely wouldn't have been all one-way traffic like it is at the moment. Let's say everyone in the world's on equal form, playing to their best. Let's say everyone's playing to their best, Jonathan. You've got it. Would you have any Liverpool players in a combined 11? If Trent said Trent's at his best, would he be your right back in a team, for example? Salah, if he's at his best, like he has been the last few seasons, does he play on the right hand side?
Yeah, I mean maybe you bring in Salah Salah for Grealish effectively, so Foden would move across to the left in mine. I think it'd be pretty hard to change any of the midfield 3. Maybe you bring in Van Dijk to play alongside Diaz. Yeah, Walker or Alexander-Arnold is really difficult because I'd want to see Alexander-Arnold playing in a City press before I kind of committed to that.
Thiago would probably get into mine, but I don't know how you'd who would you drop for Thiago? The Man City midfielders are obviously also good as well.
I guess it wouldn't be Rodri or De Bruyne. Would be my guess if you were going to put Thiago in. Either way, they'd all be good teams, wouldn't they? If everyone was playing at the top of their game, there'd be some sensational 11s that you could make. Let's finish then with our predictions. Josh, it's your last show, so we'll come to you first.
Man City 3, Liverpool 1.
Same as what I was going for. Exactly the same. Jonathan?
I've gone 2-1 for City.
2-1 for City. Tighter game. You think Liverpool might come alive on the big occasion?
Yeah. I just think they'll be so aware of the possibility of getting absolutely smashed that they'll play with a level of caution that's not familiar to them. And I think also City may not go chasing the game in the way that they would against Southampton or something. I think if they get 2-1 up, they might be happy to just hold that.
I mean, the good news for Liverpool fans is that Haaland had a rest in midweek as well. So he'd be recharged. He'd have been in his chamber, ready to go to pull himself out for this game. So expect some goals from Erling Haaland. I mean, I say that. I mean, we expect goals from Erling Haaland every single week now, and multiple goals at that. Time now for my least favourite subject. It's Aston Villa against Chelsea. Jonathan, Steven Gerrard, thoughts?
I thought he was a poor appointment, and I haven't really changed position on that at all. I just think with the spending that they've had, I think the spending's been a bit weird, a bit scattergun. I think it could have been better directed, but yeah, you don't want to be in a relegation battle. The spending is of a team who should be challenging for the Europa League, and they're obviously miles off that. I mean, 2 wins all season. I mean, they are unbeaten in 4, to be fair, and they did get a draw against City, which is not to be sniffed at.
I mean, I would say that's the only game I've enjoyed all season.
But the struggles to score goals. I mean, it's only 2 goals scored in the last 4. And I mean, that game against Forest on Monday was one of the poorest Premier League games I think I've ever seen.
I forgot it was a Premier League game. I thought we were back in the Championship. Villa and Forest back in the Championship when I was sat there watching it. Honestly, it was terrible. Wasn't it?
It was dreadful. Yeah, I mean, lovely goal from Ashley Young, but if your way of scoring goals is getting 942-year-old Ashley Young to smash it in from 25 yards, I'd suggest that's not a viable solution in the long term. And yet, you look at the players they've got with Coutinho and Buendia and Ings and Watkins. It should be better than that, and it's not. And I think there's the lack of width. I think is a massive problem. I think that's quite easy to set up against if all the width is coming from the fullbacks. I just think there's a lack of imagination, lack of precision, and it's if you play a back 4 and sit 3 blokes in front of it, it's going to be hard to play through. So, but defensive record isn't too bad. But I think it's a pretty basic way of playing for a squad that should be better than that.
Excellent. That's cheered me up at no end. I mean, Josh Jonathan talks about goals. I think Villa have got 7 players tied on 1 goal this season, which probably tells you everything you need to know. That 7 joint top goal scorers at the moment for Villa.
Yeah, it's been a very difficult watch, and I think when you're playing so poorly as Villa are, I think what you want as a manager is to be tucked away in those sort of Saturday 3 p.m. slots where it's not all there for everyone to see. But I think your last 4 games have all been televised, and the last 3 of them, I think Leeds, Southampton and Forest, as Jonathan said, have just been so difficult to watch. They've been so boring. So the fact that everyone can see and dissect what's going wrong probably hasn't helped Steven Gerrard there. And I think another thing that is going against him quite significantly is that he was appointed Villa manager pretty much, I think there was a few days between him being appointed as Villa manager and Eddie Howe being appointed as Newcastle manager. And obviously Newcastle have improved so much under Eddie Howe, whereas Villa are probably, I don't know, Dan, you'll have to be a better place to say, but was Dean Smith better at the point he was sacked as Villa are playing now under Steven Gerrard?
Well, Villa had lost 5 in a row, so it wasn't brilliant, but this feels pretty bad.
Yeah, and it just all feels so. It's just so difficult. I'm not even an Aston Villa fan, but it's so hard to watch them play at the moment. And he's still insistent on picking Philip Coutinho, who over his last 20 Premier League appearances has scored 1 goal and got no assists. So I don't know why he keeps picking him. Jordan Pickford's got as many goal involvements in that time as Philip Coutinho, which is just what you want from Aston Villa's perspective. And if Villa's owners are as ambitious as they say they are, then I don't really know what they're waiting for. It just feels like they're waiting maybe for this unbeaten run to come to an end, and then they'll make a decision. But there doesn't seem to be any sort of signs of improvement because Gerrard's so stubborn and stuck to this sort of narrow system that he plays, which clearly isn't working, clearly isn't getting the best from his forward players. And you've actually had like a very not comfortable, but you've had a very decent set of opening fixtures and sort of only won twice from that against teams who were pretty much in the relegation zone as well at that time, or in and around that sort of area. It's just I think it's just awful. I just don't see how this improves unless a change is made in manager.
Well, I used to be in the situation where all my followers on Twitter were Villa fans, so I just used to get stuff from Villa fans. I now get fans of other teams telling me that Villa are the most boring team to watch in the league, and you're right, it's because they've been on telly so much recently, and it's been drab, it's been dour. I mean, I'm very, very miserable as a Villa fan at the moment, Jonathan. It's pretty pathetic out there. On Coutinho, what do you make of that? Because he does just keep getting wheeled out, but somewhat in his defence, I would say absolutely nobody is playing well. Not one player.
Yeah, but I mean, okay, that's true.
It's not a functioning team, is it? If you're not in a functioning team, your star man like Coutinho isn't going to be playing well because he isn't going to be getting the ball in the right positions and he isn't going to be getting the ball quick enough, and that's exactly what's happening.
Yeah, I just think if you're a club of Villa's stature, which is to say an ambitious sort of mid-table Premier League club, it's very easy to get seduced by a big star like that. And I think you could say the same with Everton and James Rodriguez. It's, we've signed this sort of world-class player, this player who's, in James Rodriguez's case, had been a Golden Boot winner at the World Cup, or in Coutinho's case, had gone for 120 million that Barca paid from Liverpool. And now he's playing for us. This is great. But why is he playing for you? He's playing for you because he's proved himself not good enough at that previous level. And some players on the way down do find a new lease of life and they do find a new home and they do have a positive impact. But I think it's very easy for those sort of stepping stone players to drag you down with them. And you see the pattern repeat that type of player comes into a club. His first game, he'll come off the bench, or he'll set up a goal or set up a couple of chances in his first couple of games, and everybody, look, he's rediscovered his form, and then they drift away, and they're a massive drain on resources, and everybody's looking for them to provide the spark, and they don't quite fit in, and it just sort of sucks everything down. And the problem is that they're a massive liability financially because they don't have any resale value. He's probably on massive wages, or certainly comparatively high wages, and psychologically he's not sort of climbing the hill looking to the next level or thinking of dragging the club to the next level. He's trying to slow his way down the hill, and at the minute, he's pretty much abseiling down that cliff face. I
tweeted this in midweek, and you touched on the fixtures as well. Villa's games have not been easy, but they have had a relatively kind opening and have yielded the lowly points total that they have. It's my belief at the moment that Villa carry on the way they are, they want to be that top half team, but there is far more chance of being in a relegation battle. And if Villa were in a relegation battle, this isn't a dig at the players, but I don't think that's a side that's equipped to be in a relegation battle, if that makes sense.
I think it would be a massive, massive shock to the system for them if they sort of do end up sort of loitering around that bottom three and deep into the second half of the season. And it would be a massive shock for the club as well, because I think, as we've said already, that the ambitions are to push back into Europe, and they're just so far away from that. And it just feels like everything Gerrard's sort of doing just sort of isn't sort of working, even to the fact of replacing Tyrone Mings as captain. I can't imagine that's done tremendous things in the dressing room, especially.
All it's done is put the weight of the world on John McGinn's shoulders instead. That's all it's done.
Yeah, and he's still picking Mings, which I imagine he probably didn't want to do. I imagine the thought process of taking him, the captaincy off him, was because he wasn't going to play as much, and obviously now Diego Carlos is out, he has to play Mings, so it's just a bit awkward. And we've said it before in another show when on Aston Villa about Michael Beale, and I know you said that Villa weren't playing particularly well anyway when Michael Beale was there, but you see QPR now.
It was a bit better than this.
You see the sort of the work that he's now managed to sort of do at QPR. I think they're joint top of the Championship, but third in the table. Maybe Steven Gerrard is still missing that connect on the training ground, for someone that can sort of do the proper coaching. I know he's obviously brought in replacements, but it's not going well. So maybe there is actually something there about the absence of Michael Beale in that respect. But yeah, I would be shocked if Villa sort of don't pick up the performances and they sort of don't start winning games well. I'll be shocked if Gerrard's still there at Christmas, because something does need to change. Otherwise, like you say, you will have to be looking over your shoulder at that sort of bottom three.
I just think it's such a weird setup. I don't think your assistant manager or your coach leaving should have the huge impact that it apparently seems to be having at Villa. I don't like that at all.
I do think that point about Christmas is key, though, isn't it? That I do wonder now if a lot of managers, a lot of clubs will think there's no point sacking somebody before the World Cup because whoever comes in, there's just no time to put it right. Whereas the World Cup gives you this 5-week window to go off and find another manager and let them get in and work out what's going on with a little, almost sort of a mini pre-season, albeit with several players away. But they can sort of get their feet under the table a bit before the games start again.
If I was a manager, I'd almost be annoyed at getting a job when the World Cup's on. You got all that football on TV, and then suddenly you get a new job, and you got to think about that instead of just enjoying the World Cup. I'd be a bit annoyed if I was an out of work football manager.
I mean, try being a journalist during the World Cup.
That's true. That's true. What do you mean? Try being a journalist during the World Cup? I am one. I am one. Let's look at Chelsea now. Ruben Loftus-Cheek. You just always think he's just a squad player for Chelsea. You know, he fills the homegrown quota. He's not really going to be a big player for them, Jonathan. But he plays almost every game and has done for a few years now. Not really mentioned with England, though. I mean, the right backs are picking up injuries like they're going out of fashion, and Loftus-Cheek has played some football at right wing back. Is he an outside chance for England?
Yeah, I think actually not a bad chance for England now. I mean, the issue
midfield's not great either, is it?
Yeah, exactly. And he's been playing centre midfield recently for Chelsea and been playing very well. I mean, the issue with him has never been his ability. It's just been he can't stay fit. But he was in the last World Cup squad, so Southgate clearly liked him then. I don't see any reason for that to have changed. It's just been that he hasn't played regularly. But you look at that central midfield and yeah, Henderson's been injured and isn't playing well. Calvin Phillips is injured and we don't know if he's going to be back. Bellingham's very young and isn't quite as defensively minded as you might like as the player to play alongside Declan Rice. So I think he's got a very good shout of getting in as a sort of auxiliary central midfielder, but he can also cover on the right, which is necessary because, who knows how many right backs England will have left by then. Walker's injured. Alexander-Arnold, who I'm not sure should have been in the picture anyway, but he's injured. Maybe Ben White comes in, but he's not really a wing back. He's somebody who can play on the right of the three centre backs, which isn't what he's doing at club level. I think as a sort of almost as a joker, as a sort of cover role player, Loftus-Cheek has got a good shout.
Yeah, he's a kind of player as well that I think suits international football. He's quite unique. You know, he's a big guy,
which is. I mean, and this sounds very basic, but being a big guy helps in terms of set plays. And if England are to do anything at the World Cup, set plays will be important.
You're talking to two big guys there. We know it helps, don't we, Josh? Have you enjoyed watching Loftus-Cheek this season?
Yeah, I think, like you say, he's been a player that you sort of have forgotten about. Not forgotten, but he's always been sort of in and out of the picture because of those injuries, and he's 26 now, which is obviously isn't old, but because we've read and seen and heard so much about him during those early stages of his career. Now he's 26. It feels like maybe he missed his moment, which is harsh because he is, like I say, he's only 26. But he's played. I think he's featured in all but one of Chelsea's games this season. He was clearly trusted by Thomas Tuchel, and he's clearly trusted by Graham Potter, both excellent technical coaches. So that must speak volumes about the sort of player he is and the sort of the impact that he can make. And it is good that he sort of seems to have put his injuries behind him, because I think he's got such a unique skill set, as you said, and he's obviously got a great football intelligence as well. So I do think it would be interesting. Maybe the fact that he did go to the last World Cup, maybe that does go in his favour in the fact that he could just come straight into the squad, because Southgate does know bits about him already. So the fact that he hasn't been called up for a while, maybe that doesn't matter so much. But yeah, it would be interesting to see if he does get in that squad, because I do think he can offer something a bit different to the rest of the England players. And obviously versatility, as you say, it can be such an important part in international football. He obviously has that in abundance.
Yeah. Jonathan, score prediction then for this one, Aston Villa against Chelsea?
1-0 to Chelsea.
1-0 to Chelsea. Josh?
2-0 Chelsea.
2-0 to Chelsea. I'm torn here, not because I think Villa are going to win, but Gerrard did beat Potter twice last season, and also Villa's only good performance this season has come against an elite team in Manchester City, which tells me in some ways that Villa's setup might actually suit playing the better teams. I think Villa lost by 1 goal to all the good teams last season. Saying all that, though, I'm going to go Aston Villa 0. Chelsea 3. Let's move on now to the just a minute section. And Jonathan, should we do a recap? I don't know, do that again. We're going to move on now to the just a minute section. And Josh, how did we get on last week?
For the second week in a row, we all got the same amount of points. We all got 2 correct scores and 4 correct outcomes. So there's still absolutely no change in the leaderboard in terms of points difference and standings. So yeah, we keep matching each other.
It's tight early doors. Jonathan, you've got the first game and you have Brentford against Brighton.
Yeah, I think for De Zerbi, this is really the first game where you can measure him. That to go away to Anfield in your first game in charge of a club is very, very difficult. And Brighton performed extremely well then, probably should have won, but drew 3-3. Then against Tottenham last week, another difficult game. Brighton probably will feel that they should have got more out of it than a 1-0 defeat. But the games against Liverpool and Tottenham aren't really where Brighton are going to be tested for all that they are, have been sort of around the Champions League places. But Brentford away, I think, is the kind of game where they would be looking to get points, and they did win both fixtures last season 1-0. Brentford have hit a little bit of a wobble recently. They've only taken 1 point from the last 3. They haven't scored in open play in those 3 games. Norgård and Pontus Jansson both out for them. And Brighton, Moda's out, and of course, Enoch Mwepu has been forced to retire, which is very sad for him and somebody who I thought was a really good player. But I'm going to go 1-1 in this game.
I'm going to go 2-0 to Brighton. Josh?
1-1 as well. Same as Jonathan.
Don't worry though, Brentford fans. I think you're at Villa Park next weekend, so all those bad runs will come to an end. Josh, you've got Leicester against Crystal Palace.
Yeah, it seemed like Leicester were back on track when they beat Forest 4-0, and then they obviously took the lead against Bournemouth last weekend, but then they ended up losing. So it seems like they're still very much in a bit of a problem. It also seems like Jamie Vardy's days as an elite Premier League goal scorer might be coming to an end now. No goals yet this season, and he's only had 10 shots in 9 appearances, which is quite low. Whereas Patson Daka has obviously scored in back-to-back games now, so he might now finally have the chance to become Leicester's sort of first-choice striker. Brendan Rodgers will be without Wilfred and Ndidi, Castagna and Ricardo Pereira again this weekend, and Ryan Bertrand and Nampalys Mendy are also sidelined. Goals from Eberechi Eze and Odsonne Edouard saw Palace come from behind to beat Leeds 2-1 at Selhurst Park last weekend. That was only their second win of the season, and their first since August, so that was a good timing for them and bad timing for Palace. They've actually lost their last 3 at the King Power Stadium and have only won 1 of their last 8 Premier League away matches though. So I think this could end up being a bit of a slog for both teams. So I've gone for another 1-1 draw.
I'm going to go 2-1 to Crystal Palace. Jonathan?
1-1.
1-1. Has Ryan Bertrand ever played for Leicester? Honestly, every weekend is Ryan Bertrand's out. Has he ever played a game for Leicester? I honestly don't remember ever seeing him on the pitch for them. Strange.
No, it hasn't been a great signing.
Jonathan, you've got Fulham v Bournemouth. Scott Parker could have been managing either of these teams, but he's managing neither of them.
Yeah, clash of 2 promoted sides who've both had slightly odd starts to the season. I'd say that Fulham, they were cruising on 11 points after 7 games. Everybody's sort of saying, they've worked it out. They're much better this time, and then they've lost their last 2. And both, I think you'd probably say they were pretty unfortunate with various injuries and absences, and Chalobah being sent off against Newcastle. Mitrovic, I think, should be back for this game, although it's not absolutely certain. But they're still without Salomon, Kazawa, Willian, and there's a doubt over Tete, and Chalobah's still suspended. Bournemouth now up to 8th in the table. They've taken 9 points from 5 games under Gary O'Neill after Scott Parker was sacked. Suddenly they look defensively very solid. They've only let in 4 in those 5 games under him, having let in 16 in the 3 before that. They're without Stanislas, Brook and Kelly, and doubts over Rothwell and Pearson. And both games 1-1 last season, but I think Fulham might just nick this 1-0.
I'm going to go 2-1 Bournemouth. I think Fulham are on the start of a bit of a patchy run. I think Bournemouth are flying under Gary O'Neill, so I'm going to go for Bournemouth 2-1. Josh?
Same as you, 2-1 Bournemouth.
2-1 to Bournemouth. Now, let me tell you, if you thought the Forest Villa game was a spectacle, Wolves against Forest this weekend. Josh, you're going to preview this one for us.
Yeah, it's all pretty miserable for Wolves at the moment. They've lost their last 3. Julian Lopetegui has also turned them down in midweek, so still no closer to sort of appointing a new manager. They've only scored in one of their last 5 matches. Nathan Collins is still suspended. They do at least get Ruben Neves back. Raul Jimenez, Sasha Klajdic and Pedro Neto are all still injured, so still very short in attack. Nottingham Forest have backed Steve Cooper, a bit of a surprising move, but quite refreshing, I think, in football these days that they've given him a new contract, although it'll be interesting to see if they start losing again, what happens there. They followed that up with a 1-0 draw against Aston Villa on Monday night. It wasn't a pretty game to watch, as we've already said, but that did stop a run of 5 straight defeats. He made a couple of changes as well, dropped the likes of Jesse Lingard and Nico Williams to the bench. Emmanuel Dennis scored his first goal for the club in that game, and summer signing Morgan Gibbs-White was the who scored man of the match, so at least something positive for them to cling on to there. They'll be disappointed if they don't get at least a point here, but I'm going to go for a 0-0 draw and will, as you said, be a very awful game.
I'm still not decided, so I'm going to come to you, Jonathan.
Wolves to win 1-0.
I'll just go 1-1, just because that was what the score was against Villa the other night. Finally, a bit more of a juicier game for us. Jonathan, Tottenham against Everton.
Yeah, I don't know if it's just the people I follow on Twitter, but there seems to be like a load of grumbling around Tottenham this season. And I don't really get it because they're still third. I mean, they haven't played brilliantly, but they are third. They're only 4 points off the top, and they're 4 points clear of Chelsea. Their only defeat was that defeat in North London derby to Arsenal, which to an extent you could say was down to the red card to Emerson Royale and a couple of misplaced passes on breaks. I think it's probably a couple of poor away forms in the Champions League that have soured the mood. But at home, they've won 6 out of 6 in all competitions. They could be without Kulusevski still, and Emerson Royale is still suspended. But they're playing an Everton team who have only conceded 9, which is decent, but they've only scored 8. I think they struggle to mix. To balance the defensive and attacking aspects of the team. They gave the ball away in midfield a lot against United, and I think that could be a big problem against Spurs. The usual lengthy list of injuries for them. Spurs won this game 5-0 last season, probably the worst performance under Lampard. I don't think it'll be quite that bad this time, but I have got Tottenham to win 2-0.
We're going for 2-1 Tottenham.
And I'm going to go for 1-0 to Tottenham. Manchester United at Newcastle for you, Josh.
Manchester United, I feared a little bit when Alex Iwobi scored last weekend, but I thought they demonstrated patches of real control against Everton, and you sort of saw more signs of what Erik ten Hag wants Manchester United to do on the ball and without the ball. Anthony notably scored for the 3rd Premier League game running. Ronaldo obviously scored his 700th goal of his club career as the winner. It was a real up and down game for Casemiro, doing some stuff that was just absolutely basic and awful, and then obviously played a very, very important part to win the ball back from his own mistake to give Ronaldo the ball to score the winner. Varane will likely come back into the team. His injury wasn't as bad as everyone was sort of feared against Manchester City. He came off the bench against Everton. Will probably be rested in the Europa League and sort of start this one. Anthony Martial probably won't feature again. It's been really disappointing for him, the injuries that he keeps picking up. And on to Newcastle. We said for a few weeks that the stats sort of suggested that Newcastle was sort of playing better than the results showed, and I think now they're sort of getting those results. They've scored 9 goals across their last 2 games, and they've managed to do that without Alan St-Maximin and Alexander Isaac. So that's a real positive for Eddie Howe. He'll definitely have St-Maximin back this weekend. Joelinton has surprisingly been benched for both of those games that they've scored 9 goals, which is quite interesting. Everyone sort of thought that he had become such a key part for Eddie Howe, but yeah, he hasn't played the last 2 games. But I'm going to go for a 3-2 win for United. They've scored at least 3 goals in each of their last 5 home games against Newcastle. Obviously, Newcastle weren't very good in that time, but I'm still going to go for that 3-2 win.
I'm going to go 2-1 to Manchester United, Jonathan.
Yeah, same as me, 2-1.
I feel like I've predicted a lot of 2-1s there. I feel like most of my predictions have been 2-1 so far. Jonathan, your final game in the Just a Minute section is Southampton against West Ham.
Southampton have now lost 4 in a row. They've only scored 1 in that time. Now, last week losing to City 4-0, no great disgrace in that, even if they had drawn against them twice the previous season. But they've also lost to Wolves, Villa and Everton in that run, which is not encouraging. So Ralph Hasenhüttl is yet again under pressure, although he does seem to spend most of his time under pressure and then keeps on pulling out results just when he needs them to keep his job. West Ham, completely the opposite. 3 wins in a row before they play Anderlecht in the Europa League. I think there's a sense that all those summer signings, or at least some of those summer signings, are starting to settle. Scamacca's now scored in his last 3 games. Having said that, they were pretty lucky against Fulham. Pretty debatable penalty, and then 2 goals where a hand appeared to be used in the build-up. One of them wasn't seen by VAR, and one of them was apparently in the wrong phase of play. Having said that, they're now up to 13th. Those relegation worries perhaps starting to fade. 3 points above Southampton. Southampton did do well against West Ham last season. They beat them 3-2 at London Stadium, beat them 3-1 in the Cup, and it was 0-0 at St Mary's in the league. And I think it might be tight again, so I'm going to go 1-1.
2-1 West Ham.
2-1 West Ham, and I'm going to go for 2-0 to West Ham United. Josh, big moment here. Your last ever contribution to the Edge of the Box podcast, unless your move doesn't work out and you come back. It's Leeds v Arsenal.
Leeds have suffered 4-1 defeats in 4 of their last 6 home matches against Arsenal, and I'm pretty sure we'll see something similar here. They're winless across their last 5 in the Premier League after last weekend's 2-1 defeat to Crystal Palace. Things not going too well for them at the moment, and they probably don't want to be facing their league leaders right now. Arsenal obviously beat Liverpool 3-2 last weekend to stay top of the table, and they do have a decent chance of maybe extending that lead at the top with City to play Liverpool later on Sunday. They've won 9 of their first 10 matches in all competitions, and I'm going to go out bold with a 5-0 win for Arsenal.
I was thinking of going bold for this. I was going to go 4-0 to Arsenal, so I'm going to stick with that. Jonathan?
2-1 to Arsenal. 2-1
to Arsenal. So that's your last ever prediction, Josh. Someone's going to be coming in and obviously taking on the predictions that you've already done. And it puts me and Jonathan in a difficult spot. So if Who Scored winning, it's kind of meaningless. It's been different. Mind you, I suppose it was different people predicting last season because it flitted between you and Martin. So I suppose in that respect, it hasn't changed. That does us then for this week's Edge of the Box. Thanks ever so much for tuning in and watching us. Josh, it's been a pleasure podcasting with you. Jonathan, have you got anything you'd like to say to Josh on his last pod?
Yeah, it's been a great pleasure, and good luck with the future.
Yeah, good luck in the new role, Josh. Be a surprise to me who's replacing him next week, because at the moment I don't know who it is, so I look forward to that. We will be back next week, I imagine on Friday, because I think there's games in the Premier League in midweek, so get your post notifications on and subscribe to the channel to know exactly when the video's coming out. Enjoy all the football, and as ever, please stay safe.